How do we ever meet?
Right.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Great.
Hey, Tom.
There's a All right, I kind of grew up the environment.
Okay, so. I got it.
The usual stuff.
So Heather. Bombarding it right now. She's used to it, right? She is.
Everybody gets it
Right now, I'm bombarding
I
it.
think it's the usual, or usually,
Yeah.
happens at
They're
where.
not strange.
No.
It is bad.
Start to walk out and see the vehicle.
I was in Woodland
So we need to stay behind.
Saturday afternoon, it was on good fire.
Oh, it's terrible.
Thank you. That house.
Oh. And check out, it's got 2 story. We don't know if it's salvage. And then the two bungalow couple of them.
Okay. We saw it first.
Yeah, it was last week.
We got this here now. It'll go.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Wait, was it 4? I can't even remember ever 4 on fire.
Yeah. Our son is a volunteer firefighter.
Yeah, and then they were like.
So they responded.
I think they did, yeah. It was like.
Does he live out there?
No, he
Yeah, so
doesn't.
they asked me a bunch of questions about that, and then.
What do you
it was very relaxed.
Want to get experience and help him get his Cal Fire season. And so he does.
Yeah, So that happened. Then they did mention, one thing that they did
Thank
say.
you.
is,
Yeah.
They were like.
Yeah.
Board meeting, I was like.
It seems scary. Yeah. It seems scary.
I mean, shocking. Oh, yeah.
Is that yours?
My district.
Your district.
Not my district.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cottages.
I saw the Victorian, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it was started by a friend of mine who sold it years ago.
Is it like a kitchen fire? Yeah, it's some fires on the July 3rd from the local fireworks and then there's.
Well, someone suggested they couldn't do that. But we're still-
Yeah, it takes a while to find out.
One of the houses have a fire, have a- it's now cleaning up, they do it, scratch it over. Oh, she's fine, but, you know, we've got, we'll find these.
Oh,
Two community rally.
I kind of fell out of the loop. I went back to
Most of my.
Olympia to see my sister who had house on her side. I went to help her. So. Wanted to work one day, but I don't care about people. So I came to visit and help her. You want to just, you know, what?
You're free
Yeah.
until 3.
I'm free till 3:30. And I got home. Are you in there? I actually are. Oh. Didn't really follow the news. Yeah, like from. So like today's.
Yeah, you know what's gonna happen. Yeah, exactly.
With Caltrans, for me is when I get to have lunch with you and the colleagues. The joy for me is.
I have the best.
Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah.
They were just wonderful. I was like, I don't know.
No,
They say that I told you.
It hurts to breathe. Yeah, I'm not driving and laughing, you know, if I.
So, yeah.
The fun to
They
do.
gave the tour, they did to the painters of that, and they had a great time.
Yeah.
Oh, so, oh, yeah, this is before, this is. 25 people. Yeah, they had, I don't know, I've seen the troll. The troll.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
And the painters on top. And real.
Oh, it must have been great.
So.
You got that California.
So I guess this is the always.
Some good ideas.
This is where the thing. So I just wanted to let you know that. When this big Anthony public policy. So I begin, when you join power first, the whole. They fire.
I feel dread, but I only feel good over 2 hours.
All the Caltrans staff.
I'm pretty happy with everything.
The citizens.
It's pretty small.
Like, I'm small, too.
And you got to work with extra people.
Yeah.
What I'm gonna do is get-
My first book was where I was challenging her. She wanted to move the train station further away from downtown.
I'd love to take a picture out there.
If we have land, let's house develop.
That's great.
Move the train station.
That's.
Yeah, so, that's fine, that was 1980.
I'm glad. I mean,
We're trying to close it down. That's the plan, we're gonna buy 4,000 meters. Close on the plan and the light of it. Which would be crazy, but thousands of acres. Yeah. We're hoping you're going.
That's correct.
So, see the two office.
Thank you.
I've been trying to make sure that the CIO. Yeah. I'll give it a shot. Yeah, I can find out. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, are the buses staying in the town?
It's okay.
Oh, yeah. It's a dark. I'm there. No, no.
Well, I almost need a jacket. Yeah.
It's not like that's extra.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not. I know.
No.
We are going to,
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
that's this right there.
So, Golfy's running about 10 minutes late.
We'll start anyway, to go, and she has to leave at 7.
She does. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Incorporate her behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right behind them.
Okay.
I might ask her if she,
Okay.
in the citizen, would like us to relocate on the agenda.
Good time.
I think it's fine. We have one on house.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. You adjusted the. No.
Yeah.
Another word.
Yeah, so they don't look quite as well as one or the other. But it's still fine, so like this is fine. Mine is like.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be better. I'll go back. And I have, you feel like, I'm not.
No.
Yeah, I've never been at a house though.
Good enough water. No, thank you. Ready to start? Start the tape. Good evening, everyone. Now 6 p.m. This is Monday, July 17, 2023, and we are the Board of Directors of the Yolo Transportation District. We'll be proceeding with our monthly meeting. Madam Clerk, would you kindly call our roll?
City of Woodland,
Present.
City of West Sacramento,
Friendly reminder, please, everyone use your mics.
City of Davis, Yolo County,
I'm here.
City of Winchester.
Here.
We do have a quorum, and we are expecting our West Sacramento representative in a few minutes. So with that, we have a special opportunity to see the new buses that we'll be using for our point-to-point service here in Woodland and Winters and Knights Landing. And we're going to have a 10-minute recess, and everyone's welcome to go out and look at these with us. And we'll reconvene at 6:10, okay? Let's go.
So we've got vests. Everybody has the pleasure and privilege of wearing a vest when they go into our bus yard. I'm taking you the new buses. Oh, okay, great. Okay, super. Anybody else want that one?
Great.
Would you like more?
You look great.
Oh,
And just ignore it. Yeah.
I'm gonna, yeah, I don't want to regret it too much.
Man, I should really.
Okay.
On one side, right?
Yeah, one size fits all. You don't have to zip it up. Some of us might not be able to.
Safety first.
This is called Busman's Holiday, right?
Alan. It's upside down.
What?
It's upside down.
Oh. All right,
There you go.
there we go. I can figure it out. There's only about 6 different ways to put it on. Third time's the charm, right?
There you go.
Oh, yeah. Pretty good, yeah. Oh, okay, I'll go get it. Your little tan.
I'm coming.
Anyone else?
Hello.
Am I supposed to be in here?
Yeah, yes, they stepped outside to look at the new bus.
Let's do that. Okay. My back hurts.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no. Just like, I have to go get out of the car.
So they're taking a 10-minute recess. I think they'll be back in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm totally fine. I just, I literally feel like I cannot walk. Great.
Still having my feet going.
Oh, yeah, no, fine. That's great.
I had to turn the video off. It was weird looking at my stuff.
A little bit, right? This is where I'm supposed to be seated. Did we add someone?
Yes, Greg Wong from Caltrans is here today.
Oh, and Caltrans is normally on there.
Correct. So we have one member attending online and then Greg is also.
Okay, awesome. Which members attending online? Okay. And where are they from? Not sure. Just here. Did we already vote on consent?
No.
Okay. Yeah, they're not at 104. Yeah, good. I'm gonna. All right. Go pass everything and go home. Get it done. Get her done. Well, may as well motion. Get it done.
All right, having some, I guess, but the slides and go out. but-
I'm kind of.
That was pretty efficient. Yeah.
Not bad.
And
Start there early.
we're so happy Donnie has done that. Well,
Give you a private tour anytime.
Oh, yes, no, I was telling director, but Laura, it's all right. I'm gonna, I was telling Director Lauren, that I'm having back issues. The idea of why. We've talked about this. I bought holes. Fine. Yeah, no, I'm thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you all. That was very nice. We took a brief moment to go see the new vehicles that will be used in the point-to-point service. And it's a lot that's been exciting to say the least. So this is now time for public comment. Any member of the public is welcome to address the board on issues not otherwise on our agenda this evening, because we will entertain comments at each agenda item. Is there anyone with an item that's not on the agenda tonight? Yeah, please come forward now.
Alan Hirsch Davis. I know a lot of people go to Ashland to go to the Shakespeare Festival.
Ironically, we're not hearing you.
Not listen.
I know a lot of you go to Oregon, Alan Hirsch, who gave us, I know a lot of you go to Oregon, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. My wife and I went out there this weekend, we took our bicycles, we bicycled to Medford, 15 miles, wonderful bike ride, and we took the bus back with our bicycles up one. And the Rogue Valley Transit System has a wonderful system. Behind the driver on the wall, there is a TV, there is a screen that shows the route, it flashes the route, and it flashes, zooms into the route, and it tells you the arrival time, tells you the destinations, tells you it gives you all this information. We sat in the back of the bus and we could read this screen way in the front of the bus. You'll take, because all it tell you exactly where the bus was going, and it was really an amazing system. So I urge you, if you ever go up to Oregon, Ackman, take the bus, even for a short ride, and look at the screen, and it's really an amazing sort of thing. It makes it accessible, especially for new riders. When you're a tourist, you really don't know what's going on. It's really assuring. The other thing I want to mention, I want to express concern that basically that a lot of policy discussions about I-80 has been happening in this ad hoc committee, which we know is the intention to make this a permanent standing committee. And ad hoc committees are supposed to be temporary committees. And clearly the intention of this committee is to be a permanent committee. So I suggest that the ad hoc committee we should no longer have closed door discussions of an I-80 policy in any department in closed door ad hoc sessions. First, it's not an ad hoc, it's really a standing committee. That's what's going on here, because it's on stage. And second, I think it undermines the legitimacy of the process we're going through. So please consider making that committee a standing committee and having it been open and noticed in all activities in the public things. So any information shared is public. Thank you very much for considering that.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. All right, any additional public comment? There being none, we'll move on to consideration of the consent calendar. This is items 3A through 3E. Any item on the consent calendar that any member of the board wishes to remove for independent discussion? Being none, is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on any item on the consent calendar? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Director Early moves. Director Lauren seconds.
Director Early moves, Lauren seconds. Motion to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. This brings us to the regular calendar. We're right back on our time frame. And we begin with administrative reports. And these are subjects not specifically listed, limited to clarifying questions. So to begin with board member reports, does any board member this evening have a verbal report on the right side? No?
I just want to make a comment that I have heard a lot of feedback about microtransit in Winters from different residents and different council members. And the people that are riding are really excited about it. Really are happy with the pricing and also the free transit on a very hot day. So thank you. We're doing great things.
Thank you. I have nothing from what's on the moment. All right, then we'll move on to Trans Dev's verbal report. Friend. And there's, I was teasing Richard, it just says Trans Dev, it doesn't have his name.
Okay, good afternoon. Well, we're looking good still. We are moving right along. We have actually 13 that will be behind the wheel training. We have 2 in permit training still. They'll be done next week with their classroom and going to behind the wheel as well. We're looking right now by the end of the month to have between 4 to 5 reached out to revenue driving. So we're so far looking good.
That's wonderful news. Do you expect to have the drivers you need for our point-to-point service?
Right now, we're 7 from what our number was. So we're already looking at that. We'll have another 5 by the end of the month. And then in the beginning of next month, the other ones will be coming out. So it's looking good so far.
That's good to hear. Questions from our representative from Transdev? I see none, so thank you so much. So we will now move on to the executive director for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will note to the board that there was a pretty lengthy executive director's report that went on in your email on Friday. So things I would just add to that, first, number of public comment that's been received over the last month, and that's printed out for you as well. It was in your inbox this afternoon. So I'll just draw your attention to those. Also wanted to note a couple of things. So we are the Spare the Air heat days that we've had the last few days, as well as the heat wave at the request of the public health officer. We've been offering free rides on heat wave days, and so at their direction. So this weekend they overlapped somewhat. Friday and Saturday were Spare the Air days, and then the heat wave, officially heat wave was through Sunday, not today. So we provided free rides all 3 days. And we're lucky in that we have funding from what's called the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, or LCTOP, state funding that is set aside for providing free rides. It's also what's allowing us, on the part of the consent calendar, was extending our youth ride free program for 2 years. So those funds allow us to offset the loss of fare revenue when we do the Spare the Air days, the heat wave, and the youth ride free program. So those funds are not permanent, but we do have a fair amount of them now. And so we're happy to be able to kind of do that. And our intention is to honor Spare the Air days throughout the summer, as well as any other requests from the public health officer, to make sure that people have a safe way to get around when it's too hot to be out walking or biking. We have a finalist for our director of finance position. We had interviews with a couple of finalists last week, and we have our preferred candidates coming in tomorrow. And so we're excited for our final interview. So we're hopeful that we will have somebody on board very soon as a permanent replacement for Mr. Levinson, who's done fantastic work for us as our interim CFO. And then lastly, I just want to note for where is my other piece of paper? I have it down. For just timeline for the launch of the Beeline service. So our software is going to launch, soft launch, the 24th of July. That's next week. That's our goal. So I know Daisy and her team are very focused on getting all that done. We had a training for both Transdev and the YoloTD operations team to make sure everybody knew how the software works. And then for an actual rollout, when we're rolling it out publicly for the Nights Landing and Winter service, we're looking at the week of August 7th to 14th. And then the launch of the Beeline in Woodland for mid-September launch, pending the drivers. But as Michael alluded to, we sort of interrogated him last week about the status of the drivers, and we're feeling very hopeful that we'll be able to get there by mid-September. So, and my final thing I'll note is that we are once again providing transportation for swim lessons for kids in the Nights Landing in partnership with the Davis Sunrise Rotary and Swim America. So we're about halfway through that program, and it's been another success this summer. I can't remember the exact number of kids that are going through the program this year, but we're really happy to have been able to continue that partnership for a second year. And that concludes my report.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any ad hoc committee reports tonight?
There has been no ad hoc committee meetings since the last board meeting.
All right, then that takes us to the long range calendar.
Thanks. So no meeting in August. This is our annual break. This was built into the calendar. So our next meeting will be in September. We anticipate at that time, hopefully, we will have our YoloTD managed lanes draft environmental document release. So that was originally scheduled to have a workshop for that this month, but our hope is to do that in September. As well, we've been in discussion about potentially expanding the service area for a Nights Landing microtransit to include the town of Yolo. So pending some of the community engagement that we're currently getting underway in that community, we may have a request for you all to do that. Report and possible action on our salary survey, which is has been getting underway over the last month or so, and then a closed session for my annual performance review. And then in October, we hope to have recommendations for you on our new Woodland location of our new Woodland Transit Center, as well as a scope of work for updating our short range transit plan, an update on the Yolo Active Transportation Corridors project. I'm very happy to say that we finally have gotten through all of the bureaucracy with FHWA, and we were able to do the notice to proceed just the very last day of June. So that's been a very long process, but we're excited to finally be able to get that project underway. And then a preliminary report on the close of the fiscal year 22-23.
Thank you, Ivan. FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, for anybody who might not know that acronym.
Thank you.
Any questions, board members? All right, then that will conclude that item 4, and we now move to item 5, the Yolo 80 managed lanes update. And
Good evening, Chair Stellar and Board of Directors, Brian Avenant, acting planning director for Iowa Transportation District. Before we get started, I just wanted to sort of summarize that we've been providing monthly updates in the staff reports, or I'm sorry, in the meeting packets over the past several months on the project, but the project kind of finds itself in some unique circumstances right now that warranted a sort of dedicated regular agenda item. So that's why we're doing that tonight. So next slide. I want to give a brief overview, just sort of reorient everyone to the project. First things first, this is a joint project partnership between Caltrans and Yolo Transportation District. Also want to acknowledge Greg Wong, who's here with us from Caltrans, Deputy Director of District 3. So he can also be here as a resource for us for questions related to.
Thank you for pointing that out. Please forgive me, Mr. Wong, for not acknowledging you.
I got a tour of your facility. We're even.
We try to be friendly here.
Yeah, so he can, be a resource for items that are within sort of, or questions that are within Caltrans's responsibility with the project. But, so I thought I'd just start with a brief orientation of the scope of the project. So distilled to its most basic essence, the project is really, constructing an additional toll managed lane in each direction between Richards Boulevard and the I-80 split, or I-80-50 split in West Sacramento. So that's what we had been focusing on as a phase 1 project. And so that phase 1 project was estimated at around $207 million plus costs for mitigation. And we had committed funding of about $97 million, 86 of which is in that federal infra grant, which you're aware of. So the reason why I'm focusing on sort of the costs and the funding that we have available to us is because that disconnect is what's sort of putting us in the circumstances that we are today with the project. A note about the infra funding that we do have is that funding has to be obligated by September of next year, and there aren't any exceptions to that. So either a project is delivered with that funding obligated by that date, or the funding will lapse. And right below that, you can see sort of typical Caltrans phases, and you can see that we're actually still in the project approval and environmental documentation phase. And the funding that we have is construction funding. So we need to complete PA&ED right of way and design all within a 12-month period, which is an exceptionally compressed time frame by freeway planning standards. And we're currently, as you're aware, intending to, or Caltrans is intending to release the draft environmental impact report this summer. Next slide, please. So several developments have occurred over the past month since, even since the last board meeting. Good news and bad news. Good news is that in June, we did receive $3 million from the SACOG Transformative Grant Program for non-construction related work for the project. $2 million of that would go to Yolo Transportation District for tolling advanced planning work that we knew needed to occur, and which we had briefed the board on a month or so back. And then $1 million would go towards Caltrans District 3 for completing the design. Bad news is that $103 million grant application that we had submitted in partnership with, or the Caltrans had submitted in partnership with us, was not recommended for funding. So that is the funding source that we were essentially relying on to close that gap between the 86 million that we had and then the 207 million cost estimate. And also the draft environmental document has been delayed in part because Caltrans and YoloTD to a certain extent are trying to navigate new CEQA requirements related to VMT mitigation requirements, and they need a little bit more time than expected because they had originally intended to release the EIR at the end of June. Next slide, please. So that has an effect on the schedule. So the slide here shows what the schedule kind of would have looked like. It's hard to see. It looks much closer on my monitor and more legible, but I'll explain it briefly. So if we had received that funding, we would have been proceeding as we had originally planned, with, concept of operations, continuing to engage with our regional transportation planning agencies on establishing governance and what, a joint powers authority might look like for the region. And then we would have also been launching our phase 2 outreach. Next slide. But because we didn't receive that funding, it kind of puts a lot of that, raises much more uncertainty where we are now than where we had hoped to be. Next slide. So the effects that I had mentioned earlier, the absence of that funding is really leading us into to conclude that with the time that we have left and the funding constraints that we have with the project, that it's not likely that we'll be able to deliver a phase 1 project that includes tolling. We just don't have the time or the funding to get us from here to there in the time that we have available. And that includes concept of operations, revised traffic and revenue, getting the design done. There's just too much time has passed. From the funding side of things, we're still working with District 3 on trying to identify funding that could help us, essentially close the funding gap for the preferred project that we would like to ultimately deliver. But that a phase 1 project would proceed most likely without, a tolling component, but that the groundwork would be laid for a toll-ready phase 2 of the project. So that's kind of where we think the project is headed at this point. Next slide. So as we're talking about funding and ways that we can shore up that funding gap, we are looking at potential sources like a federal transportation infrastructure loan program. It's a revolving loan program. It does have requirements for investment grade traffic and revenue studies, and also a revenue source to pay back that loan. Same with the private municipal bond market. So those would not be feasible for us to deliver in a phase 1 scenario because of the time and the analysis that's required in order for them to be willing to provide us loans. We're also working with state funding programs, having contacts to see what opportunities there are to help close some of this funding gap, given that we have this $86 million. It could be at risk because of the short time we have left to obligate it. An important point to mention is that there aren't any other federal funds that we can try to pursue. That was a condition of the infra grant funding that we did receive, is that was going to be it. There aren't additional federal funds that we can try to pursue. Next slide. Okay, so the previous slide showed the effects that sort of affect Caltrans District 3 and YoloTD together as a project team. And then for Caltrans, they're responsible for design and construction and delivery of the project. So what they're doing at the moment is looking at different sort of scope options for what we might be able to deliver with the existing funding that we have. Could include shorter segments. It could include project without tolling. In fact, potentially deferring tolling to phase 2. So no decisions are made. They're still doing that analysis. We had a meeting this afternoon to kind of discuss where they are. So there's more to come there, but no decisions have been made yet as to how a phase 1 project would advance with the funding that we have. But if the project scope does change and with a project with the funding that might be available to us, the scope probably would look different than what you've seen in past meetings. That we'll bring that back to you and discuss what that will look like and get your feedback and direction on that. It's also unlikely that because this funding was discretionary funding awarded to the project with a specific scope of work, they're not likely to approve any project to reprogram that fund for a different type of project. So it's either, construct the project largely as submitted to them in the grant application, or they wouldn't approve changes to that. So it's kind of where we see, I've talked to FHWA staff about, trying to get approval for a toll managed lane, and even that scope change request is met with a lot of scrutiny and conversations with them. So they consider that a significant change. So any other potential alternative to reprogram the funds for is not likely to be met with open arms by FHWA. And Caltrans is, as far as we know, Caltrans is looking to release a draft EIR in August as opposed to the end of June. Next slide. For YoloTD, just sort of moving forward, we do plan to obligate the $2 million for 20 advanced planning. We did submit the request for authorization last week, so we can continue with some activities that were scoped in that grant award, including things like upgraded traffic and revenue study. We'll continue to engage with our regional partners in establishing the regional tolling authority, but other things will go on hold. For example, CTC application that we would need to achieve tolling authority, that's on hold until we sort of have more clarity on whether tolling will advance in phase 1 or phase 2. So I think that concludes the formal presentation that we have. We know you probably have a lot of questions, so we're looking forward to having that discussion and go from there.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have questions.
I think I'm here to comment first.
Are you?
I personally hear public comment first.
Okay. We'll invite public comment. Then press it very early. Anyone wish to speak from the public on this item at this time? Come on forward. And reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Alan Hirsch, it's hard to tell the best I can, watch it. Alan Hirsch, Yolo Mobility. Tonight, of course, I'm going to speak about I-80 and an opportunity we have to show some leadership in the region and the community. We are in a world of pain. A world of pain. We have climate change is threatening our future, our children, our grandchildren, our great children, and the future of our humanity. You see this. We have unprecedented rains, floods. We have wildfires that are destroying our community. We have smoke that's closed down our university and closed down our institutions. It's just, we have a crisis here, and blood, fire, both biblical. I mean, heat, that's changing our life. It's especially threatening the poor and less economic advantage, the people who harvest our food, who build our heated housing, and even those who build our roads and maintain our roads. They are threatened. Those jobs are being threatened by this heat and the science. Science is clear about freeway widening. It doesn't work. You got the letter from Professor Susan Handy, head of the National Center for Sustainable Transportation. She basically said clearly it will not fix congestion in any sort of time frame and not make significant in the end to reduce demand. We know that we need to have travel choices, and this option does not really give us travel choices. High quality traffic, a few more buses is not going to make really travel choices. No one's talked about the rail corridor. We know it will increase greenhouse gases dramatically, or the National Transportation Center, National Sustainable Transportation model. And it doesn't even prioritize in the national preparation cut through traffic. Not even a priority fund project. We know the BR says other ones. I know you wrote in May of 2022, challenged Caltrans for more and better alternatives, more environmentally appropriate alternatives in the EIR. And I appreciate that. And you called out all of these factors, including the fact that managed lanes would not reduce the BMT, would still increase the BMT as much as a regular lane. I'm sad that Caltrans did not flex on this. We have an institution that's built to do one thing, that's widen freeways. And if there's a failure of imagination there, we know that HOV lanes are a failure. But they've continued to build it for 20, 30 years, even though it was a failure. It's hard for turning a battleship. We're turning a battleship, and we have a climate change. We need to turn the battleship. We all know that. So I'm asking for some, and you got the letter from Stephen Wheeler suggesting that now with the CTC failure to fund, we have a hiatus with a chance to reopen the AR, reopen those negotiations, provide more environmentally, at least study the alternatives for more environmental sustainability. So I'm asking you tonight to show the community needs climate leadership. Community needs hope that we can turn this around. We know that so much greenhouse gas comes from driving. We need to turn this around. The city of West Sacramento, the mayor's commission said, we're going to reduce our driving by 40%. City of Davis, city of Williams, everyone knows we need to reduce our driving, but instead we're doing something in the wrong direction. And Brian has already given up, says we can't mitigate it. We're already have a statement of overwhelming consideration. That's what he predicts. We need an alternative. I'm asking tonight for your leadership, some climate leadership. The community needs you. You were elected. Please show the leader. Please open up. I know we need to turn about it. That's going to be a conflict with Caltrans, but this is what the moment requires. Please, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Additional public comment on this issue. All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Anyone wish to comment at this time? Dr. Early?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. Hi. So, the EIR, is that, all right, was supposed to be ready at the end of June. Did I get that right? And we're hoping it's going to be available in August. Did I get that right as well? How, the only reason why I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm about to. Just fair warning. So I'm gonna talk a little bit, gather your thoughts. And so the only reason why I ask is if we had gotten the dollars, so let's do a what if world. We had gotten the 103 million, I think, was the potential, and the EIR had remained on the pace that it was. What I'm hearing from you is that we wouldn't have been able to do construction regardless, even if we had gotten the money. That's what it actually sounds like to me, but maybe I'm misunderstanding something.
It would have been a tight timeframe to try to get all of that work done. But if we had received the funding, then we would been proceeding along with the assumption that we're trying to deliver a toll managed lane for phase one. The outcome of the EIR process could have affected that, but at this point in time, we wouldn't have known, even if we would have been awarded the funding. Perhaps Autumn has some something off it.
I will say, we've always known that it was an ambitious timeline to meet all of these deadlines, particularly with the multitude of challenges from being one of the first projects in the region that has to comply with this new VMT mandate and all the uncertainty that provides, as well as this being the first federal transportation bill in 40 years that provides zero flexibility for extending the timeline without an act of Congress. So those two forces in particular, we've always known there's some amount of stochasticity, if you will, that could jeopardize the project. At this point, we are continuing, nothing has been decided as far as, whether or not tolling will be a part of a phase one project, but looking at the funding that would be needed to achieve that and what additional funding we're likely to get between now and when we need to construct this project, it just seems unlikely. Not impossible, but less likely than it seemed 6 weeks ago.
Okay, and so we have 86 million that we are trying to potentially not lose, that we have to spend in 12 months. 12 months from now, 12 months from July 1st.
It needs to be obligated by September of 24. So we don't need to spend it and have a project, constructed on the ground. We just need to have the environmental done. We need to have the right of way. We need to have design done. It needs to be bid ready and have that funding obligated by September of next year.
So basically, it needs to be able to go out for construction for bidders.
And then just last question for me, and then I'm done. So we have the SACOG money that has come to us, and it sounds like they've authorized us to spend some of those dollars. For whatever reason, if we weren't able to move forward and spend the 86 million, would the plan B to spend all of those state cog planning dollars, or what, how is that gonna work?
So, you know, we have this deadline to spend the $86 million. We're trying to figure out a partial project that we can build so we don't lose those dollars, but I think the ultimate goal remains to build a toll managed lane. And so the funding that we got from STACOG allows us to lay the groundwork for that. We were gonna do it in record time. Now we're gonna get to be able to do it on a more realistic time frame, in the hope that then additional dollars become available to then complete phase 2 of the project where the tolling would be implemented.
Great, thank you.
Any questions or comments?
We let Mr. Fong know. Easy.
I got a few. Well, if you can keep getting ready, I'll go with mine. It's just a general discussion topic about inclusivity and equity. That was the premise of a tolled project. The tolling project would generate revenues that would help with funding for local transit. So the idea that a project might move forward that does not include tolling would mean that revenue would not be available. Is there still a path? And just a discussion item for a managed lanes project that maybe with mitigation dollars would provide transit funding? Is that still something that, could that be part of phase 1 that could help us out and help us? Even though we wouldn't have a promise or a commitment for a phase 2, we could still rest on phase 1, achieving that equity and inclusivity.
But even a non-tolled project still has mitigation that needs to occur. So the difference between that and a tolled lane project is that both scenarios have one-time funds that go towards mitigating against the project's impacts. The difference is the tolled scenario has ongoing revenue that can either expand those mitigation options, or they can continue the programs that perhaps the one-time funding sort of planted the seed for.
But the question I would have is that mitigation funding would not have to be all spent in 1 year. It could be a mitigation program that would extend into an extensive number of years in order to mitigate the project's significant impacts. It wouldn't be one and done.
Not entirely clear on the requirements for that. You might know better than I do on this. But my understanding is that the one-time fund would need to be expended and the mitigations operational at the time the facility is open. And so then the scenario that you're talking about is potentially spreading that out over multiple years rather than trying to spend it all, essentially front loading the project with mitigation. I don't know the answer to that question.
I would only add that I think this is part of some of the conversation that is happening right now at the statewide level internally within Caltrans about, you know, if we build a partial project, how much of that mitigation that's for the full project needs to happen and by when, et cetera. And I think there's a lot of unresolved questions about that. I don't know if Greg wants to add anything.
So thank you, Greg Wong, Caltrans. You guys are absolutely right. Autumn and Brian, thank you for your involvement on this project. It's not just District 3, it's statewide. Caltrans is just getting into this VMP, inducing how to mitigate. I don't know the mechanics either about timeframes, step by step, mitigate all at once. Over time, it's something that I think we're exploring as a department. August. Yeah. That's what we have on the schedule. And again, it's
You're not a politician.
August. We need to have that conversation, whether, even if we had the $103 million, frankly, we'd still be in this position.
Yeah.
It's just a new process. And part of the process, and we're embracing it, it's just, you know, we're trying to be experts in something we've never done before, so. But congratulations, you're the first region, first project to do it, and.
Very good. Okay, interesting question.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Yeah, thanks so much. A couple of quick questions. I mean, I think one just, so I assume this to be the case, but with this federal inflexibility around the infra dollars, Are there other infra projects in other parts of the country experiencing the same sort of situation?
Yes, my understanding is we are not alone, particularly in the high inflationary environment that we've been in since these projects were awarded. And my understanding, I had a conversation with Jason Pavlichuk, who is State Cog's lobbyist in DC. And he said that there are a number of other projects that are in the same boat. And that it is possible that Congress may, if there's enough of them that come forward, Congress may decide to take some action to restore some flexibility to the Office of the Secretary of Transportation, but that is not happening at the moment.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Just wanted to check in on it. Sometimes you get very siloed and thinking we're the only ones in that certain situation. So actually on the issue of inflation, I mean, we know how much, sort of cost of construction have gone up and supplies too, I guess, but do we have an anticipated cost? I mean, are the numbers that are continuing to be presented to us sort of a reasonable estimate of the cost for construction for, I think, or do we have a sense of, how much things have gone up? So that's a question, right? So we are, 97 million in hand, 103 million was sort of gonna get us a long way towards the sort of, next phase, but without that, just curious about the sort of cost of inflation and sort of what we're seeing out there.
Yeah, we're really relying on Caltrans for their understanding of what the construction costs are. It does feel like what we can afford to build with the money we have in hand seems to get smaller by the day. And I think we're not alone, but really, I have to look to Greg to provide us the kind of understanding of what exactly is happening with inflation on their costs.
So as the presentation, we are discussing options. Inflation is a hard one. Yeah, it's something that we do have to consider in the cost. I don't have a number yet. If I did, I'd get a lot of my projects out of trouble with the CPC when I had to go for more money, but that's, the challenge is looking ahead. For what the construction cost index is, and we got a team of engineers that can go through and do that. But right now I don't have a good handle on any numbers. We're just trying to look at options right now.
Okay, thanks, appreciate that. With regard to the need to obligate the dollars by September of next year for the federal requirements. What about hypothetical litigation, right, on a draft EIR or on EIR? I mean, is there an ability to, proceed with releasing bid for construction and such if there is pending sequel litigation?
Yeah, Kirk Trost, who's our special counsel for this project, is not here tonight, but this is something that we did talk to him about. And our understanding is as long as the EIR is certified, even if there is a challenge, that the project can still get funding, except for in certain circumstances, perhaps if there's an injunction, I believe, maybe the case. I don't know if Kimberly knows any about this subject.
Yeah, I haven't been in the specifics, but yes, usually a project can proceed as long as an EIR has been certified, absent them as part of the challenge seeking a stay of the project and basically receiving an injunction. Now, we would have to take a closer look at the funding because funding sources may have some contingencies for litigation, but if Kirk has not seen that, then the typical sequel rules, the project can proceed as long as the EIR has been certified and the project approved. Okay.
Thank you, appreciate that. Greg, I have a quick question for you as well, just about I think, it's been it was on track and it was moving forward. And it's a internal Caltrans project, but and I think it was the I-80 corridor management plan. So that's sort of just not just a discussion of the roadway, but also of the sort of inner city train, inner city rail, the variety of transit options that exist along the I-80 corridor. That was something that was a priority of, I think, maybe District 3. I don't know if it was the sort of adjoining district was working on that at all, but it seems like it's not. I don't know what the status of it is. So would love to know where the sort of the I-80 corridor management plan is in the process. I think the reason is because it was really it seemed like it was a very holistic view of everything that was underway in the corridor. So it's like the goods movement stuff, the transit and impacts, of course, but also vehicle movement as well too, certainly. But it was definitely something that was being worked heavily on, I think, at least a couple of years ago. And so I'm not really sure what the status of it is.
I'll have to get back to you on that. I know that's another division that handles the TNCP,
Okay,
but that's okay. We'll get you that info.
okay. I mean, I think one of the issues and consistently that's been raised is, obviously improved transit. Certainly, we know there's, a lot of benefits for, high quality regional transit. Along certainly the freeway, but also, I mean, I think a lot of folks have sort of said that, we'll just increase the number of trains as an example, in Capital Corridor line. That's a great thought, but it's not as easily done as just increasing the number of trains, certainly because Union Pacific owns those lines and there's the capacity issues and negotiated with Union Pacific, but just curious about the sort of the status of the I-80 corridor management plan, because I think that has a lot, it was going to include a lot about sort of all modes throughout the entire corridor, not just also this sort of 17-mile segment. So really appreciate a status update at some point around that.
Director Ferris, I can shed some light on that.
That'd be great.
That process did conclude, and they do have a final document that was completed in January of 2022. I did look at different scenarios for the entire corridor from, I want to say, the Carquinez Bridge up past Sacramento County on 80. And this project was included in that plan. So that's where.
So is it just I mean, and it is my words, not yours, but like, is it just a plan that sort of sits on the shelf? I mean, or what happens with that plan? It's released. What do they do with it? What's the point of it?
That's a good question. I mean, Caltrans, it's, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
It's the Caltrans.
Yeah.
Would need to respond to that.
Okay, great, thanks, I appreciate that. And then lastly, just as, I mean, Director Early asked this, but, sort of trying to get a little bit more specificity, I think, but just that when do we anticipate the draft EIR? I mean, we really think, I mean, admittedly, there's a lot of work that's being done, certainly, and it's, we want to sort of got to make sure everything is correct before we sort of just release the draft, but do we still think, I mean, it's this August seem reasonable at this point, that it's.
I think by the end of August, seems reasonable.
Okay. Thanks very much. I appreciate all those answers.
Thank you. Any more questions, board members? I'd like to weigh in. I think it's very clear, a lot of great questions have been asked and my concerns have been addressed by some of them, but I also wanted to say something in the interest of the public input that we're receiving on this project. I read the letters that were sent to us this afternoon, and I think there are a lot of thoughtful ideas in there and some good ideas. And I'd like to see us get some of those good ideas. But, and I have grandchildren too, so I really care about the future. And I think if you're not environmentalists these days, you're not paying attention, as they say. But with respect to the issue of fourth lane, I look at this in the context of an interstate freeway, basically goes from Mexico to Canada, but starting at the Carquinez Bridge and going to north of Roseville is at least 4 lanes, and my knowledge everywhere, but between Davis and Sacramento. And so it isn't so much that we're working hard at this to create more vehicle miles traveled. We're trying to eliminate what's become a rather terrible bottleneck and inconveniences thousands of people all the time. I understand some people like the fact that they're inconvenienced because that thought it'll force them to seek other options. But I think the fact that I think of my daughter with 2 young children, they both have swim team and they work out through a different time. They have piano lessons, they're at different times. All of these things mean transit isn't a viable option in many circumstances for many people. And I know the kind of expectations that get placed on some of us in these roles, and we have to be many places and it just isn't realistic. That said, I'm a firm believer in the value of transit. You've sat for years on the Capital Corridor going powered bus train, and they do a phenomenal job. It's a beautiful way to travel. What would you take a car when you could sit in first class comfort on a train and work because your laptop works, whatever. So I just feel like I hope people don't assume that we don't care about the environmental implications. I just think we're the last in line. Solano County has moved forward to make sure their situation is more accommodating to the context of 80 as it exists over, 70, 80 miles, at least as far as I know. Greg's more expert than I am. So I don't believe, I believe in evolution as opposed to revolution in public policy. And I really believe our citizens, we should have tried to eliminate a bottleneck. And we are trying to make best opportunity we can out of it. I mean, the loss of tolling is horrid in my position, my point of view. It was the key to lots and lots of options, transit options. And if there's a way to get it back, I really want to do that. I mean, you look at the Golden Gate Bridge and the buses that operate, because the bridge toll is basically subsidized them, and the ferries that go around as an option. And that's getting people into transit. I love the role of economics in public policy. You can motivate human behavior by economics. So anyway, I wanted to put those on the record because I don't want anybody thinking that we're just nodding our heads up here. We really agonize about this, and we know this topic has become quite difficult, but I really believe the district is on the right path. Thank you for staff. Okay, yeah.
Mr. Chair, we do have a comment from the public online.
Oh, please, let's hear the online public comment.
Hi, my name's Gabriel Ehrlich. Thanks for hearing me. I wanted to follow up on the conversation about the managed lanes project. I heard another public commenter, and I heard the conversation among the members of the board. I heard that there's a funding shortfall and that the tolling's on the chopping block. I don't really know a lot about this issue, but it seems to me that it would be better if the extra lanes were on the chopping block. It seems to me like that's probably the most expensive part of the project. I imagine Caltrans might not swing for that, but it seems like something to maybe consider if the tolling is essential to the transit part of this. It seems like that should be the higher priority here environmentally. And I'll also say that the reason I'm in favor of transit is that, as far as I understand, freeway widening doesn't work. And the only way to get people from place to place more efficiently without them getting stuck in traffic is to provide more viable alternatives to driving. And so if we're making that extra lane, we're moving nowhere, and we're adding more greenhouse gases. And I just don't see why we're doing that. So it seems like from one perspective, the funding shortfall is a risk to our ability to make more transit work in Yolo County. But I wonder if it's also an opportunity to question the priorities here about whether the tolling should be on the chopping block or the extra lanes that are in 6 of the 7 build options. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you so much for sharing your view. Any additional public comment?
No additional comment.
I just have one more quick comment. I think I appreciate the public comment as well, the additional public comment. I think a couple quick points. For me, I think, people can agree or disagree on the parts around whether or not, a 4th lane is the right thing to do or not. But I think that, a 4th lane that is HOV only, I think is, destined for failure personally. I think that, and I appreciate the comments and discussion around, sort of phase 1, phase 2. I think that the tolling has many benefits. I think if there's going to be an addition of a 4th lane, some type of managed lane, I think the tolling has a lot of benefits. So I think that is really, if we are going to continue to be supportive, sort of robustly supportive as an agency, we should really be pushing for that option, as particularly in light of, as opposed to just an HOV lane. I think that is, and I understand the sort of issue around funding and lack of funding, but also particularly around sort of issues of, proposed phasing and such. But I think that just Director Dulcich raised it earlier around the issues of equity. At the very beginning around what the toll revenue was going to be used for, as an example. We know that it would be used for a variety of purposes. I think that a HOV only option is a real risk. And I think it is ultimately not the thing that we should be doing and supporting as an agency. I think that I understand that the proposal that was submitted, that sort of the infra grant was specifically around HOV only. And I do know that there is this ability, it seems like there might be an ability to have an adjustment so that the federal government is supportive of a managed toll lane. But I think that if we end up just putting in ultimately just an HOV lane, that we are really doing a disservice to the entire sort of thoughts around this entire project. So, I mean, I also I think it's important. I mean, I think it's something we all know, but I think it's really true. Like, we are at a point right now where, I mean, I know everyone's working diligently and figuring out the funding shortfalls, but at this point, we're in a spot where all of these discussions may be moot. I mean, there currently is not obviously the amount of dollars that we need to even construct, some sort of reduced project at this point, let alone the project that was envisioned. And then, I think on top of it, and we'll see what happens, but I think, the inflationary sort of period that we've experienced, I think we're seeing it across the board of projects all across the state. The costs have gone up extremely high and across many different projects. So not just road sort of related projects as well. So, I'm hopeful that we can figure out a solution, but I think that, we should be absolutely pushing for the tolling project if we're going to be supportive of a project. Otherwise, I think the HOV lane is just not something that we should be supportive of.
Thank you. And Director Lauren.
I've been really listening on all of this and reading my information and listening to my peers, and it didn't feel like I needed to say anything tonight because so many great comments have already been made by my peers. But I just want to be very clear that Director Farrick's position is, I'm completely aligned with that position, that we need to make sure that there's a toll lane, however it comes about, that we're committed to the equity portion of that, and not less. But the project has to come forward in the phases that we can afford, but we cannot lose sight of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any remaining comments, questions? All right, well, that concludes our discussion of the 80 managed lanes project for tonight. There's no action on this, but hopefully the staff will take our comments and incorporate them. Clearly, we have a terrible tight deadline, as well as a lot of policy questions yet to be resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just say it's very helpful to hear the board's feedback as we're kind of in the middle of trying to figure out the path forward, and look forward to subsequent conversations.
Thank you. All right, we will now move on to item 6. And this is to receive a mid-year progress report on Yolo Transit District's annual goals and to provide feedback on new or evolving priorities. Is it yours?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you'll recall, go ahead to the next slide, Heather. Back in November last year, this board adopted 11 annual goals for the year. The reason that we did it back in November is because we did it for the first time in my tenure, several months after I started. So we've been sort of on this kind of October, November timeframe for this. And so these 11 goals, along with the accompanying tasks and milestones, are really form the basis for our work plan, both collectively and individually within the agency. And so we're 8 months in. We wanted to check in and see how's it going? How are we doing towards achieving those goals that you identified for us? Next slide, or that we identified together, I should say. Go ahead and skip to the next slide. So there are 11, and I'll just kind of touch on each of them, and then we'll sort of summarize where we are and I think where our challenges are going forward. So the first goal was to chart the long-term trajectory of the Yolo County Transportation District. And this is a goal that's very focused on strategic planning. So as you can see around the room, we have our vision, values, and priorities statement that were adopted by the board late last fall in December. And then there was a kind of a second phase of strategic planning that we had talked about doing. We put that on hold based on some of the feedback we received from you in February that there was a lot happening and several new board members that were getting up to speed. So we haven't moved that forward, but it's something I would like to underscore from the board tonight is to think about when do we want to kind of go back into strategic planning. So something we can continue that conversation, but I just wanted to put a flag on that piece for you. Our second goal, advancing equitable and sustainable implementation of the Yolo Managed Lanes project. Of course, we've just been talking about that for the last 45 minutes or so. Our third goal, improving our fixed route transit service. Next slide. We have district-wide service planning and policies for microtransit, something we've been talking a lot about over the last few months. Number 5, strengthening our transit operations and internal coordination. Goal 6, expanding our multimodal planning and programming. This is things like our YATSE, our Active Transportation Corridors project, as well as Yolo commute. Goal 7, improving our customer experience for transit passengers. This is using things like technology, better materials, opportunities to pay, contactless payments, etc. Goal number 8, strengthening local partnerships and increasing community engagement. Goal 9, completing capital planning and procurements with improved tools. Next slide. Goal 10, improve grant financial planning and administration. And goal 11, fostering employee engagement and professional growth. Next slide. So how are we doing? So of those 11 goals, we had 35 tasks that were associated with them, and then milestones for each in terms of what we wanted to get done in 6 months, which was by May, and then what we wanted to get done by next November. So of those 35 tasks, about a quarter of them are behind schedule. About a third have made satisfactory progress, a third have made significant progress, and a little less than a quarter are complete. My math is a little round there. But 2/3 kind of are underway, and then a smaller number behind schedule and complete. And those are, there's a detailed attachment, 15 pages that kind of goes through all those, but I just want to highlight some of the areas where we've made progress and in the areas where we continue to have some challenges. Next slide. So key highlights. So this photo actually was taken today. This is the bus you just saw. Our Beeline service is set to launch in September, and we've made a lot of progress on our district-wide microtransit policies and fare structure. You all have sat through the meetings over the last few months. I think we've made a lot of progress. We've gotten to 30-minute headways on the Route 42, which was a key goal of Yolo Go, and that is now implemented. So once we launch the Beeline, make a few other very small changes, we will have fully implemented Yolo Go once that has launched. We secured $2 million in SACOG funding for tolling advanced planning. We really expanded our outreach engagement, particularly around microtransit and some of the changes there in Woodland, as well as around Yolo 80. We grew Yolo Commute's membership and program offerings quite substantially this year, or I should say in the last 8 months. We adopted our zero emission fleet plan just in the nick of time when it was due to the Air Resources Board. We completed all of the time-sensitive procurements that we had, and this is significant because this is one of the areas that we were actually really far behind in last year's work plan, and we've now gotten them all done ahead of schedule. And I think maybe less important to you, but I think really important to us as a team, we overcame some significant staffing challenges and transitions over the last year, but particularly for our planning and operations team, including an internal restructuring to better make sure that we had the right leadership in place, leadership structure in place for both planning and operations to move that work forward. So I'm really proud of the team and how much they all came together to kind of keep things going, even in the midst of all of those transitions and challenges. Next slide. In terms of areas where we haven't made as much progress as we'd hoped, clearly a lot of uncertainties and delay on environmental review and funding for the Yolo Managed Lanes project. Also some pretty major delays in terms of getting approval for the Yolo Active Transportation Corridors, or YATSE project, which is also federal grant funded. That's the RAISE grant. As I mentioned in my executive director's report, we did finally just get the green light for that a couple of weeks ago. We've had our consultants selected and the contract approved for many, many months now, going on close to a year. So we gave them the notice to proceed, and we're going to be kicking off that meeting next week, 2 weeks, something like that. So we're glad that that's finally moving forward. We're behind schedule on our capital improvement plan, our fare structure review, and our short range transit plan. Again, these are all kind of long range planning efforts that have been on the work plan for quite some time, but really just kind of back burner due to staffing shortages and turnover. But we're excited we're finally getting some of those underway now. And then lastly, grant tracking and procurement improvements. Our interim CFO, Leo Levinson, he went down to halftime, I want to say in January. So we kind of put a lot of these longer term priorities on hold until we were able to bring in a new full-time director of finance, which we're very, very close. I'm hoping to move that forward. So in terms of next steps, our goal is to align our annual work plan with our budget process. That just makes sense, right? Have a work plan and then have a budget that matches that up. So we sort of need to do this pivot, right, from having done the work plan in the fall to wanting to then do the work plan in the spring. So we're planning to make that pivot this year. So in March 2024, we want to have a board workshop on goals and work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. And then we'll have our annual budget workshop, which we do in April. And then in May and June, bring you first a draft and then a final of both the work plan and the budget kind of as an integrated packet for the fiscal year 24-25. So that's the plan. Maybe back up one slide, Heather. That concludes our presentation and happy to answer any questions and also hear your feedback around particularly the strategic planning question, but anything else that you feel is important to talk about as far as the work plan priorities.
Thank you. That was a great comprehensive summary. Members of the board? I think, yes.
Super simple, I might have missed it. This is the mid-year reporting, and what's the end of, is it January or?
So the end of the year would be November, but due to our kind of wanting to shift the timeline, I'm proposing that we kind of extend it a few months and then do that in March.
Okay, thank you.
And Director Burns.
Appreciate the updates, and I mean, I think especially as it relates to this slide, I think sort of doing the alignment of the goals and work plan, aligning it in sort of in advance of the budget planning process, I think makes a lot of sense. So, I think it's also probably pretty fair to say when you look at some of the areas of progress versus things that have been sort of maybe not in the back burner, but items that are getting some work. And I think a lot of energy is being put into the managed lanes project clearly, and so I think I think there's there's only enough time, only enough hours in the day to sort of work on everything, and so clearly that's where a lot of priorities and prioritization of staff time has been. I do appreciate seeing the sort of items around the sort of short range transit planning, fare sort of analysis. I mean, I think those items are very important. So glad to hear that staff is also thinking about sort of starting to do some of the work on those as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Members of the public, comments? Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you very much. This plan is exemplary of in terms of what we have public agencies, the transparency and the accountability. It's a huge quite amazing. We're so fortunate to have on to lead this agency. My little thing is about the website and that interaction with the insight manager. So I think we've not quite complete there, but Chris Kwan reached out to me and says, if you have some feedback, give it to me personally, and I sent him some feedback, and it's a work in progress. So just let me say, this is an amazing report, and we're very fortunate to have this sort of management in this agency.
Thank you, sir. Any additional public comment? All right, but we have reached our adjournment, and please note we are not meeting in August as reported earlier. Our next meeting will be on Monday, September 11th at 6 p.m. right here at our offices. With that,
Sure, Stella, I just wanted to know for anybody.
there will not be any
Session, there will not be any
action
action.
following our closed session, so we will not be reconvened. There'll be nothing to report out. Thank you for my meeting. Adjourned.
So that closed session will be in a small conference room just around the corner.
Something.